Hi, my name is Janet Mosher, and I teach at Osgoode Hall Law School at York University. And my primary areas of research, writing, and teaching relate to poverty, violence against women, and homelessness. No, there's not adequate housing, and that's one of the primary reasons why people experience homelessness. In fact, there's a huge shortage of adequate housing for Canada's population. The idea of hidden homelessness, which is sometimes referred to also as relative homelessness, is the idea that while some people might not be in a shelter or living on the streets, they actually don't have stable or adequate housing. So it's meant to capture a whole range of different kinds of situations. One would be, for example, you don't have a place of your own, and you couch surf. You go from one friend's place to another friend's place, perhaps to a stranger's home, but you don't have any place that you could call your own home. Some also use that term to describe women who are living in violent relationships. So you might have a shelter in the sense you've got a roof over your head, but you experience regular forms of physical and other types of violence. We'll say that that's a form of hidden homelessness. And I guess yet another kind of hidden homelessness, some would say occurs where your housing is really inadequate, and it could be inadequate in different kinds of ways. It could be inadequate in that it's in a very, very bad state of repair, such that it's actually not a healthy place to live. And it could be inadequate in that it's overcrowded. You've got 2 or 3 families, let's say, sharing an apartment that's got 2 or 3 bedrooms. So some would count that as well as a form of hidden homelessness. And yet another dimension of that, some would say, includes also where you're paying more than 30% of your income on your housing, or you're paying so much of your income for your housing that you actually don't have enough to meet your other basic necessities. So you can see there's a range of different forms of homelessness, and a lot of people will move from one form to another form and back again. And a way to think about it is that their housing is just very, very insecure and unstable. Some people describe this as there kind of being multiple causes or many pathways or routes to homelessness. And some think about it as a combination of what you might think of as structural factors and individual factors. So structural things would be things like unemployment. So as rates of unemployment go up, that is more and more people, although they're looking for work, can't find work. People lose a source of stable income, and that makes their ability to be able to maintain housing very precarious. So for some, that's a route into poverty. For some people, it could be individual causes. So for many people, a significant form of physical or mental illness makes it impossible to maintain regular employment and to provide for oneself. The kind of stigma that people experience and discrimination based on mental disability in particular makes it very, very hard to maintain employment. And if you're not able to maintain employment, and social assistance rates are really inadequate, that for some can be a route into homelessness. It's also the case that for both homeless men and women, there's pretty high rates of a history of violence or trauma in their lives, and it's particularly true for women. And to the extent that, again, it's a structural problem, there aren't adequate forms of counseling, support, etc., medical attention available. It's a route into homelessness. So many, many different pathways. Some would say as well, if you look at Aboriginal peoples, very, very high rates of homelessness, much, much higher than the rates in the population. And some would trace that back to a history of colonization and the kind of harms that are a result of the process of colonization. So again, lots of different pathways that suggest that there has to be a multiplicity of strategies to try to respond to homelessness. Yes, of course. There's lots of solutions. Just for example, it's clear that one of the significant problems is poverty and the absence of adequate, affordable, and safe housing. So some would say what various levels of government need to do is to work effectively together to develop a national housing strategy that would increase the number of units that are available and affordable for people, so increase the number of the amount of public or social housing that's available. From what I said earlier about the different pathways into homelessness, clearly things like employment, minimum wage, all of those things are connected to one's ability to be able to maintain one's housing. And then issues related to violence against women and children, addressing violence, providing the forms of support that people need who experience different kinds of physical or mental disabilities. So a range of different strategies. And there's a number of organizations, and the Wellesley Institute is one that's kind of set out a blueprint for providing the amount and forms of adequate, safe, and supportive housing that we would need to address the problem of homelessness. There's lots and lots of eligibility requirements. The system is governed by more than 800 rules, almost all of which relate to eligibility of different sorts. But generally, what you have to demonstrate is that you have inadequate income, and very, very inadequate income, or no income at all. One of the things that you have to do as well before you're eligible is to deplete pretty well all of your assets. So just to give you an example, if you're a single person and applying for social assistance, and Ontario Works is a particular form of social assistance for people who don't experience significant disabilities, you'd have to reduce your assets to just under $600. So some say that form of asset depletion that's required makes it very, very difficult for you to then re-enter the labor market and to get off of welfare once you're in receipt of welfare. There's other requirements. I guess another one of the most important is if you're applying for Ontario Works, you as the applicant and everybody in your family or your benefit unit who's over 18 has to enter what's called a participation agreement. Some describe this as workfare. Basically means that to be eligible for your benefits, you have to participate in particular kinds of work readiness activities, and if you don't, you're penalized and you're cut off benefits for, I think the initial period is 3 months, and if you are not in compliance with the participation agreement a second time, you're cut off for 6 months. So that's another really important requirement. And you're also required to basically find the first job you can get and to keep that job. So those are some of the requirements anyway. No, it's absolutely not. And welfare rates vary from province to province. In Ontario, so if we think about social assistance, has 2 different programs. One is called Ontario Works, and the other is called the Ontario Disability Support Program Benefits. The Ontario Disability Support Program benefits are only available for people who meet the definition in the legislation of a disability. And those benefits are higher than if you're on Ontario Works, but they're still inadequate, particularly given the additional costs that many people with disabilities incur. If you're in receipt of Ontario Works benefits, it's absolutely the case that the benefits are inadequate. So those benefits are divided between for shelter and then a basic needs allowance. And the amount that is allowed for shelter is say if you're in the city of Toronto, really only a fraction of the average rental cost in Toronto. So I think it's acknowledged widely that the welfare or social assistance rates are absolutely inadequate for being able to provide housing and feed yourself and your children.